Welcome back to the News Hub here at WSJ Live. I'm Simon Constable. Well, what is the likely impact and fallout from the storming of the U.S. embassies in Libya and Egypt? Well, we got Hani Sabra joining us now. He's from the Eurasia Group and he's a Middle East and North Africa analyst there. Broadly speaking, Eurasia Group looks at political risk and the implications of that, right?
Yes, sir.
So what conclusions can you draw from what happened yesterday in Egypt and Libya?
I think several things. The first thing I would say is I would separate the two incidents, because if we look at what happened in Libya, it was a more violent attack, but it was also an attack in which the authorities didn't have the capacity to stop the attack. In Egypt, it was different. It wasn't as violent an attack. But, you know, if we look at the footage, it was clear that the authorities didn't have the willingness to stop this. You know, just a few weeks ago in Egypt, there was a protest against Bashar al-Assad outside of the Syrian embassy in Cairo, and the authorities very quickly broke that up. So they do have the capacity to break up these kinds of protests. So I think the first thing to do would be to separate them. And I think the other thing to add is that, you know, most of President Obama's comments today focused on Libya, obviously because the ambassador and 3 other staffers were killed in the attack yesterday. But I think from sort of a regional, geopolitical and diplomatic perspective, the Egypt-U.S. relationship and how that unfolds as a result of this incident is more important to look at. You know, if we look
That's more important than the Libya one, even though the ambassador to Libya was killed. You're saying the Egypt relationship is much more important. Yeah,
I mean, obviously, the incident in Libya is a much more shocking, sort of despicable act. But in terms of geopolitics and in terms of what's more important, it's the Egypt-U.S. relationship. I mean, Egypt, you know, borders Israel. Egypt is the recipient of $1.3 billion in military aid from the United States. It's sort of the leader of the Arab world. And so I think that's the more important relationship to look at. And the interesting thing there is that while the Libyan authorities unreservedly apologized for the events, we've largely seen silence from Egyptian authorities.
Why is that? Why haven't we seen the Egyptian government come out and say, look, you know, we're sorry, this shouldn't have happened. We should have had a protest if we wanted it, but it should have been peaceful. You shouldn't have had your embassy raided. I
mean, I think that's sort of the key right question. And I think that, you know, the Egyptian president, Mohamed Morsi, is between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, you know, he wants to look like he's a defender of Islam, so he can't criticize these protesters who are protesting against a movie that sort of depicted the Prophet in a very negative light. So he doesn't want to criticize them. So he hasn't criticized them. At the same time, he's been silent because he also can't sort of take an aggressively anti-U.S. stance the way these protesters are. This is a man who is worried about, you know, the economic situation in Egypt. He's worried about the IMF deal. You know, there was just a delegation of 100 U.S. businessmen visiting Egypt. This was the tail end of their visit, talking about what a stable place Egypt is, what a big market it is, how they'd like to invest in it, and then this incident happened. So Morsi's sort of stuck, and I think this is sort of the first big test for him as a diplomat, and he's failed.
What do we see across the North Africa? We understand that the U.S. embassies in Algeria and Tunisia were bracing for protests too.
Sure.
Is this something that is reflective of just a few people in each of the countries, or is it reflective of a bigger movement, a bigger feeling?
I think, you know, it's, you know, in each country it's different. I mean, I think that a large majority of the protesters probably in Egypt were Salafi, which is the more sort of right-wing, austere Islamic group. And I think that, you know, there were Salafis that were active in this attack in Libya. But, you know, there are differences. I mean, Libya is awash in weapons. A lot of these Salafis have weapons. That's not really the case in Egypt. You know, in terms of their actual popularity, I think it's, you know, it's limited. I don't think they're the most popular group, but they can be very vocal. So, you know, in Tunisia, we saw just a small group of Salafis in the last few months, you know, protest against universities, attack hotels that have hotel bars. So, you know, even if they don't represent sort of the broader population, and they certainly don't, they do have the potential to sort of upset the balance and in some cases do things that are destabilizing.
Okay, well, we shall see, and we hope there is no destabilization. Thank you very much. Hani Sabra, he is the Mideast and North Africa analyst for Eurasia Group here in New York City.